When modern pop culture looks back at the year 1066, it behaves as if the destination of Western civilization was decided by a single coin flip at the Battle of Hastings. We are told the story of an Anglo-Saxon kingdom naturally giving way to Norman administration, laying the concrete foundation for the modern English-speaking world. But this singular focus is a byproduct of historical selection bias. In reality, modern England didn't just narrowly become Norman, it missed becoming permanently Scandinavian by a matter of yards at a bridge called Stamford. The year 1066 wasn't a duel, it was a multi-front continental power trap. While the Anglo-Saxon king Harold Godwinson was staring south, waiting for William the Conqueror, a fleet of 300 warships dropped anchor in Yorkshire. At the helm was Harald Hardrada, the King of Norway, former commander of the elite Byzantine Varangian Guard, and arguably the most formidable military strategist in the medieval world. Had Hardrada won the war, England wouldn't have just retained its northern cultural character. It would have been structurally stitched into a massive maritime North Sea empire that would have completely altered the trajectory of the Western Hemisphere. To understand how close this was, we have to look at the structural exhaustion of the Anglo-Saxon state. Harold Godwinson managed to pull off a legendary logistical feat, marching his army nearly 200 miles north in just 4 days to catch the Norwegian vanguard completely by surprise. But look at the cost. The battle at Stamford Bridge was an absolute meat grinder for both sides. Even though Godwinson won and Hardrada fell, the victory completely fractured the defensive infrastructure of the Anglo-Saxon kingdom. When Godwinson had to instantly turn around and march another 250 miles south to meet William the Norman at Hastings, his elite household troops, the housecarls, were heavily depleted. The real access point of 1066 wasn't that William was a superior military mastermind, it was that Harold Hardrada had accidentally done all the heavy lifting for him. William conquered a kingdom that had already been logistically shattered by the premier vanguard of Scandinavia. But what if the tactical surprise at the bridge had gone the other way? If Harold Hardrada takes the English crown in 1066, the immediate structural shift would be a total realignment of Europe's geopolitical axis. For centuries, England was facilitated between looking south toward the Romance language systems and continental Europe, or east toward the Baltic maritime networks. A victory for Hardrada means the absolute termination of French and Latin administrative influence over the British Isles, instead of the insular, feudal land tenure system introduced by William the Conqueror. England would have been structurally integrated into a maritime trade consortium. Financially, this would have been an economic powerhouse. Hardrada was infamous for his massive wealth accumulated during his years raiding and commanding forces in the wealthy markets of the Mediterranean, Egypt, and Sicily. But by combining the vast treasury of Norway with the agrarian taxation infrastructure of Anglo-Saxon England, London would have become the southern trading capital of an unassailable northern superpower. Furthermore, the domestic administration would have looked entirely different. Norman rule consolidated power into a hyper-centralized monarchy that crushed local autonomy. Scandinavian political structures, however, relied on the thing, regional assemblies of free landowners who possessed genuine legal leverage over the crown. The governance of England would have evolved down a decentralized, law-bound track generations before the rest of the continent. The most profound divergence, however, would be the language you are listening to right now. English is a hybrid Germanic language containing a massive layer of French vocabulary and a good bit of Greek and Latin influences. It is a direct result of Norman nobles displacing the native Anglo-Saxon aristocracy. Under a Scandinavian administration, the French language never crosses the channel. Instead, Old English would have naturally fused with Old Norse, two sister languages that were already mutually intelligible at the time. The transition would not have been a linguistic colonization, but a rapid acceleration of Danelaw culture that had already occupied half of England. The language of modern global commerce would sound significantly more like Scandinavian, entirely stripped of its Latin and Romance inflections. Culturally, the erasure of French influence means the complete avoidance of the 100-Year War. England would have had zero structural claim over French territories. Instead, the military and naval investments would have been pushed outward into the Atlantic. With Scandinavian naval technology, advanced hydrodynamic longship construction, and an explicit cultural inheritance of deep-sea exploration, the colonization and mapping of Iceland, Greenland, and North America wouldn't have been a series of isolated expeditions. It would have been a state-sponsored imperial expansion, centuries ahead of schedule. So why does modern historical media treat this reality like an impossible fiction? Because the historians who inherited the post 1066 world had an explicit agenda to legitimize the Norman conquest, to justify the absolute destruction of English autonomy and the execution of campaigns like the Harrying of the North. The new establishment had to paint the old world as primitive, disorganized, and in desperate need of continental civilization. By making Vikings synonymous with mindless brutality, Western history successfully erased the memory of a highly sophisticated, mathematically advanced, and literate maritime empire that would have become the vanguard of the modern world. We don't live in a world shaped by natural historical inevitability. We live in a world built on the structural exhaustion of an army that had to fight two empires at once in the same month. As far as I am concerned, we are living on the remains of that Anglo-Saxon British Empire that William the Conqueror built from the bones of England. If you like this kind of content, give me a like. Tell me if there's any historical thing that you would like me to research into, if I don't already know about it, to, just discuss. I love history. I'm a history buff. I think understanding history is the prime way to understand our current age. And if there's something that I want to do, it's always understand our current age. Because God, am I lost. God. But you want to understand how this specific structural loss and led directly to the ultimate demonstration of monarchical tyranny, check into my video on the Harrying of the North right here. Let me know in the comments, would a Scandinavian North Sea Empire have survived the Middle Ages, or was it always destined to split apart?